Welcome, everyone, to Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We're your hosts and co-founders of FantasyForesight.com, coming to you from the Rambo Fixture Company studios. I'm Ben.
And I'm Jay.
You ready to get rolling, Jay?
You know it. Let's do this.
All right, let's go. Welcome in, everyone. It is Thursday, May 21st, and we've got another great ADP study episode for you with our guy, the Foresight Encyclopedia. And as a new add-on this season, we'll be covering the tight ends in the last installment of this 2020 ADP study series. And once again, Fantasy Foresight, the podcast, is live. How you doing tonight, Jay?
Ben, I'm great. I know last week we talked about this could be kind of a gross and disgusting episode because we're covering the tight end position, but I'll tell you what, every week we learn some interesting nugget, some interesting trends, and some valuable data regarding drafts heading into every season. So I'm looking forward to what we're going to uncover tonight with the tight end. Steve, how are you doing tonight, my friend?
Hey guys, well, first and foremost, I want to say thank you both for having me on. I've been looking forward to it all day. Coming into this podcast a little heavy-hearted, and I know that you guys are, aware of why, and I just want to share with our listeners that today is my little brother's birthday today. He would be 35 years old if he was still with us, and, unfortunately, when he was 32, we lost him to a heart attack. Now, at 32 years old, heart attack, as you would imagine, is certainly out of left field. And the reason I just want to share that really quickly, as personal as it is to me, is for all you out there, I know we have a lot of males that are probably in our age group that are listeners. And I know as guys, we might have the tendency to, rub dirt on something. We feel like something might be a little off. We'll just, kind of deal with it, see what happens. And my message is, hey, something does feel off. Go see your physician. If you aren't already, go see your physician annually. A lot of good preventative medicine out there nowadays. So, if just one person who's listening hears that and they go see their doctor and it, for any kind of health ailment, sets you in a better health trajectory, I'm glad I shared that. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Good stuff, Steve. Yeah, Chris is definitely always in our hearts for sure. So, we're gonna round out Steve's blog study series, getting back to fantasy football. This podcast series is all based on his blog study examining the 6-year history of tight ends, comparing ADP ranks to their actual fantasy finishes. You can find all Steve's great work under the Foresight Encyclopedia tab at FantasyForesight.com and follow him on Twitter at FF_encyclopedia. And beyond that, you can also, in that Foresight Encyclopedia tab, click on his archive site and see some of the good work he's done with the Chris Effect on his archive blog site.
Heck yeah.
So definitely check that out if you haven't before. So once again, back to the study, we are going to be looking at 3 key pieces of information tonight for each of the 12 highest drafted tight ends over the last 6 seasons. First, we're going to check and see if they lived up to or hopefully exceeded their ADP price tag. Did it a little bit different than Steve's written blog study for the purposes of this podcast, and Steve will touch on that a little bit later. Second, we'll take a look at their relative usability percentage to see how often they finished as a top 6 tight end, a top 12 tight end, or a TE1, or an unusable tight end 2. And then just for fun, we'll check out the way too early ADPs at fantasyfootballcalculator.com to get current examples of the actual tight ends these concepts apply to. Third, we're going to look at it from a new perspective tonight compared to the last 3 episodes in this series. Tonight, I'm going to also tell you how many tight end ones go undrafted every year. There were that many that I felt the need to change directions, record it, and tell you all about it.
Oh, boy.
This should be a fun one. As a reminder, before we get started, our research perspective is most applicable to 12 to 15 team single QB PPR redraft formats, but many of the concepts can be helpful to dynasty players too. All our fantasy finishes data comes from fantasypros.com, full PPR weeks 1 through 16, and all of our ADP data always comes from fantasyfootballcalculator.com. All right, you guys ready? First up, we've got the highest drafted tight ends over the last 6 seasons. Steve, take it away, buddy.
All right, fellas. Well, before we dive into that, and Ben, you mentioned it a little bit already. tonight in this podcast, we're looking at the ADP tight end ones from the perspective of whether or not they gave you a good return on your investment. And what I mean by that is they finished within 3 spots of where they were drafted. So, a perfect example of that is you look at George Kittle last year, who was the second tight end off the board, finished as tight end 4. So while he didn't meet or exceed where you took him relative to your draft, you're still going to be pretty happy with what he turned in last season for as the tight end 4, in fantasy football. So now if you finish beyond, 4 spots or outside of that, so not within 3 spots, that is going to classify you as, a bust, so to speak, or somebody who didn't provide a return on investment. So, all right, now that we got that out of the way, let's dive into it. We have Travis Kelce last year, none other than Zeus himself, going as the ADP tight end 1. And Kelce did what Kelce has done for 4 straight years now, which is finish as the tight end 1 in all of fantasy football. And so obviously fantastic return on investment, and you got to love that. Now, like I've been doing the previous 3 episodes, I'll just go ahead and work my way through the finishes going from 2018 down to 2014, and we'll just kind of summarize everything up from there. So in 2018, we had a tight end 10 finish out of our ADP tight end 1, then a tight end 2 finish, tight end 25 finish, tight end 1, and then tight end 2 finish. So looking at it from a 6-year average, the average draft price has been the 203 in draft. So, some pretty high draft capital there, early second round pick. And an overall average finish is the tight end 7. And then 67% of the time you have gotten a good return on your investment. So again, just reminding you all, finishing within 3 spots of where you were drafted.
I thought this was going to be a gross episode, but really starting off pretty strong right now. We're getting the number 1 tight end in the middle of the second round on average, and 67% of the time he's finishing. He's giving you a good ROI within 3 spots of where you're drafting him, so you're getting an elite top end tight end. And really, the only 2 times in the last 6 years where that didn't happen were Gronk down years, either injury or injury. So beyond that, it's pretty consistent. I kind of dig that.
And one of those down years was tight end 10.
Right.
So it's not even like that kills you. That's not a good ROI, but from a usability perspective, that's still a very usable.
You're still getting a tight end 1 overall, and, depending on how scoring goes. So really, 67% of the time you're getting a top 6 tight end, and then a whopping 84% of the time you are getting a tight end 1, a top 12 tight end. And really, only once in the last 6 years were you getting a player who finished outside the top 12. So I'm liking that. Right now, we've seen consistency, like Steve just said, with the names at the top of this list, and right now going number 1, even a little bit further back, with the 8th pick of the second round, the first tight end off the board in this year's draft so far is once again Travis Kelce.
Love it. And I mean, I said that I'm going to start telling everybody the undrafted tight end 1s every year, but I'm going to be doing that every other ADP tight end. So we'll get to those next.
All right.
As far as the ADP tight end 1 goes, there is no debate. I mean, it's high-end draft equity, but I think we've all been there. You're at a spot in the draft. Maybe you're in a 12-team league. You're at the 12 and 13 spot, the 112 and the 201, and all the running backs and wide receivers that you think are worth taking at that point is gone. Sometimes it pays off to take a Travis Kelce or a Gronk at that point for sure. So, I think relatively speaking, the average of tight end 7 for the tight end 1 price tag is not what you like. But when you consider both of those seasons were due to injury and one of them still gave you a tight end 10, I mean, it's not that bad. Like you said, our expectations were really low, and we'll see if it keeps going. Steve, how's it looking for the ADP tight end 2?
Well, let's just dive into it and we'll find out. So, I talked about George Kittle just a few minutes ago. He was the ADP tight end 2 in 2019, and he finished as tight end 4, like I alluded to. So, I would say a lot of fantasy owners who went out on a limb and took him at the 304 were probably pretty happy with that finish. Now, the previous season, Travis Kelce was the tight end 2, and he did finish as the tight end 1 in all of fantasy football. Had a sensational season, which led to him going in the early to mid second round last season in drafts. So sensational return on investment there as well. And man, we're talking about Zeus a lot already in this podcast. He was our tight end 2 in 2017 as well. And guys, listen to that. He's going in the 4th round at the 403. I just want to point that out. And again, a tight end 1 finish. The previous 3 seasons, however, outside of that, we did get a tight end 8, a tight end 16, and tight end 7 finishes out of that tight end 2 position. And, over the 6-year course study, the ADP tight end 2 has been costing on average the 308. So again, still some pretty high draft capital there, and overall a tight end 8 finish. And when you do break it down, we had 50% of the time, a good return on investment, basically the past 3 seasons.
Yeah, this one's really interesting because we've already seen a little bit of a drop-off between tight end 1 and tight end 2. They're both giving you about 83% of a chance of finishing with a top 12 tight end come to the end of the season. The difference is the tight end 2 is only giving you a 33% chance of finishing the season with a top 6 tight end, and a 50% chance of finishing somewhere between that tight end 6 and tight end 12 spot. So again, still a great chance of getting a solid player, solid tight end. You just lose a little bit of that upside historically with the person drafted in that 2nd spot. So who is that going into the 2020 season? Right now with the first pick of the 3rd round. So, like you said, Steve, it still is some decent draft capital, especially for the tight end position in standard scoring formats, is George Kittle.
Yeah, George Kittle is going to be a very interesting one to watch this year. And I already, like you said, I like the trend we're seeing already. A little bit of a drop off from tight end 1 to tight end 2. And then even though you have the same usability percentages, no 2 are created equal most of the time. And like Jay said, you have a much better chance of that elite upside that you're paying for in the 2nd, 3rd round than with the ADP tight end 1 than you do with the ADP tight end 2. So the ROI might make you think twice, but once again, a tight end 8 on average is not terrible. The floor for a tight end 1 is there. Only one time over the last 6 years do you not get a top 12 tight end. There's still plenty of upside. It's not as good, but once again, you got to read your draft. If there's not running backs and wide receivers, I will never again make the mistake that I did last year, like I did with Juju. I was down on him all season, coming in. He was there way later than I expected him to be, rightfully so, because we're in a very smart league. And I was like, I can't pass the value. No. Should have taken a tight end or something at that point. And
take your guy. Take your guy.
Absolutely. And, so as promised, there were 50% of the tight end 1s last season that went undrafted in 12-team PPR formats.
Wow.
The tight end 3, the tight end 5, the tight end 8, the tight end 10, and the tight end 11, all for free. Crazy. So
man,
there's going to be other trends emerging throughout this episode, but the top tier tight ends are they're very differentiating on your roster, being that there's only one tight end that you can start. A lot of once you get past the top 3, it really falls off, and then just a big tier together of just a guy type of player. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the rest of these trends proceed. So, Steve, next up, we've got the ADP Tight End 3. How's it looking?
Well, guys, we've had it every episode. There's at least usually one sweet spot. And, man, the ADP Tight End 3 the last 6 years, I think this has to be it. And so I'll spend a little bit of time on this one. So last season, Zach Ertz was our ADP Tight End 3. Going at the 309, finishes as tight end 2 for this study. So obviously you're happy with that. Now, he did get off to a little bit of a slow start that scared some fantasy owners last season, but came on strong, obviously, and finished at tight end 2. Zach Ertz also owned this position at this exact same spot the previous season and finished tight end 2 as well. Now here's where it gets interesting when we're looking at the ADP tight end 3 over the course of this study is outside of Greg Olsen in 2017, who finished as tight end 48 because I believe he broke his foot and missed most of the season. We have seen a tight end 2, a tight end 3, and a tight end 1 finish come out of this draft position when it comes to tight ends, which is pretty fascinating. I mean, outside of one time, you have a top 3 tight end come out of the spot. So the 6-year average on draft price is the 405. So you gotta kind of like that compared to some of the other draft prices. And my goodness, 83% of the time, again, excluding Greg Olsen, you have a fantastic return on your investment. And this is even more incredible in my mind. The 6-year average finish is tight end 10. And that's with Greg Olsen's tight end 48, absolutely dive bombing that average as an absolute outlier.
It's tight end 2 if you take that out.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Which is crazy, right? Yeah.
That is crazy. Okay, so we're seeing, once again, some similarity and yet some subtle differences out of the tight end 3 spot, except we've reversed course. Instead of taking a little bit of a step down, we've taken a giant step forward. 83% of the time, you're getting a top 6 tight end come to the end of the season. 0% of the time are you finishing somewhere in the 6 to 12 range. So it's all in on upside with the tight end 3 in drafts. You've got that outlier, that one shot of busting a little bit, but really it's all upside in this spot. So who is this player heading into 2020? Well, right now, the 3rd tight end off the board is going in with the 2nd pick of the 4th round. A nice round later, better value, and that player right now is Mark Andrews.
New blood at the elite tight end level.
Yeah, he is.
Very interesting name heading into this season.
Indeed.
So I don't know how we have stumbled upon this magical secret where you are nearly guaranteed elite top 6 tight end production, but give me the ADP tight end 3 all day. I don't care whose name it is. If there's nobody that I like in the 4th round, I'm just closing my eyes and taking the ADP tight end 3.
Well,
lock it up.
Chugga choo choo, start the Mark Andrews hype train. Jeez.
Absolutely. I mean, we'll see if he ends up there come the start of 2020 season.
Yeah.
Zach Ertz is, spoiler alert, Zach Ertz is right behind him.
Nipping on his heels.
Yeah, we'll see if he can overtake him like his old usual self every season. So as long as Carson Wentz is healthy throwing him the ball. But I digress. Steve, let's start talking about the ADP tight end 4, brother.
All right, so I'll preface talking about the ADP tight end 4 by saying up until last year when I finally learned that if I'm not going to take a tight end really early, like the elite ones we've been talking about, then maybe it might be good to wait, because there's always that tier of the quote unquote ready to break out tight ends. And my goodness, if I haven't shot myself in the foot on these guys plenty of times in my fantasy past. Believe me, when I did the study and I saw some of these names, I just cringed because I pulled the trigger on some of these fellows. So, so spoiler alert, the next couple of spots might not look so hot, but the ADP tight end 4 last year was, don't vomit, listeners, OJ Howard going at the 506. Hey, he finished as tight end 28, solid tight end 3 if you're playing in a super ultra tight end flex league. But the season before that, we had a tight end 12 finish, another tight end 12 finish. I'll give Delaney Walker some credit in 2016. Finished as tight end 4. Kelsey in the season he started to emerge in 2015, tight end 6, and then we had a tight end 29 finish. So, I mean, overall, for a tight end that you're going to pick in the 5th round, I mean, you have plenty of other starting positions to fill out in your roster at that point in time. You're talking an overall tight end 15 finish. I mean, yuck. And only a 33% chance, 1 out of 3 times that you've gotten a good return on your investment out of this position.
Yeah, to me, it always seems like when you're entering a fantasy football season, there's always 2 or 3 elite names at the top of the tight end draft board, and then there's a clear separation in top-end talent, or at least top-end scoring in the fantasy world, and now you're really seeing it. You're seeing some of that risk creep in, and you're reaching for guys, and going in the 5th round, like you said, Steve, you're still filling out your starting roster. There's much more value there. We uncovered it in our running back assessment and our wide receiver assessment. There's guys you can get with much more upside at this point, and now with on average, the 6th pick in the 5th round, you're going tight end. hoping for one of the elite guys, but only 33% of the time are you getting a top 6 finisher at the position come the end of the season. Only 33% of the time are you getting a 6 to 12 finisher overall at the end of the season. So 66% of the time are you only getting a startable tight end in the 5th round. And you're taking the 4th one off the board. Not great. Another third of the time, you're getting a tight end 2, a tight end 13 or worse player. So just not a great spot. It's like you want to get one of those elite guys, or you want to wait. Like Ben said, 6 out of the top 12 weren't even drafted. So just, if you don't want to get one of the top guys, pump the brakes. So, who is going currently in this spot? And that is with the 12th pick in the very last pick of the 4th round. The 4th tight end off the board is Zach Ertz. No!
Oh.
He's going to turn it around.
You know, I'm just going to play devil's advocate here a little bit. I think you guys are being a little bit too hard on the ADP tight end 4 position here. I was once again pleasantly surprised, okay? We've all got hopefully 1 or 2 league mates that you can count on for a draft pick that you're happy about. And if somebody in your league takes the wrong ADP tight end 3 and that guy has fallen to you around later, I mean, 2/3 of the time you are getting a tight end 1. I am not saying that I would prefer this, but there are scenarios where I think it's okay. 1/3 of the time, top 6. 1/3 of the time, you get a usable one. That's 2/3 of the time you're getting what you pay for. So it's not terrible.
The train conductor's here. We just stopped in Philly. Zach Ertz got off the train. Dallas Goddard hopping on, my friend. Welcome aboard.
Wow, you've been saving that one. In 2018, I just told you how in 2019 we had 6 tight end 1s that went undrafted. 2 years ago, the trend continues. It was 5 out of 12, almost 42% of the time. Your tight end 1s are going for completely free. The tight end 3, the tight end 4, the tight end 5, the tight end 6, and the tight end 9 all went for free in 2018. So I will extend the tight end tier to like 3 to 3.5. There could be a 4 deep tight end.
Okay.
It might not
Yeah. I get you.
But once I'll spoiler alert, Steve, tell everybody how ADP tight end 5 just dives right off the cliff.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same story as the ADP tight end 4, really.
I don't have a prop for this. I got to go get my Speedo if we're going diving. Hold on.
But no one wants that. So
control Jay tonight.
Jay is off the chain, ladies and gentlemen.
Let's go.
So last year at the 509, we had Evan Engram going in drafts. He had that, ouchie concern built into his draft price, and rightfully so, because he was ouchie for a good amount of last season, which ultimately led to him finishing as tight end 18. You aren't happy with that out of a tight end that you do draft in the 5th round. Looking at the other 5 years in this study, we've also seen a tight end 24. Now, we did have a tight end 6, and Travis Kelce's first of his 4 straight tight end finishes in 2016. Can't say anything bad about that.
Travis Kelce in the 6th round. Can you imagine getting Travis Kelce in the 6th round?
Ridiculousness.
Yep.
And then we had a tight end 20. Martellus Bennett. I just like saying that name because he was one of those. He's just one of those guys that was a steady Eddie tight end for a while, and then tight end 34 finish in 2014. So I mean, overall, again, we're still talking about an overall draft price of the 512. Again, you're filling out your starting roster. There's running backs and receivers you could be taking, and you're getting overall a tight end 17 finish on average. And again, just like the ADP tight end 4. You just have that 1 in 3 roll of the dice that you're going to hit and get a good return on your investment out of the spot.
Okay, now in a tight end premium league, obviously this is a different conversation, but in a standard scoring league, no matter what your settings are, tight ends just don't score as many points as wide receivers, running backs, and quarterbacks. It's just the nature of fantasy football. So if you're going to go tight end in the 5th round when you're still filling out your starting roster, like Steve said, and the tight end 5 is only giving you a 33% of a chance of getting a top 6 tight end come the end of the season, not good. But what's worse than that is the 67% chance that player is going to finish tight end 13 or worse. Not even a startable tight end. Listen, if you want to carry an extra tight end and you have a deep bench, fine. But really, if you're in a competitive league with a thin bench, that's a droppable player largely. So you're drafting a droppable player in the 5th round. That is a huge mistake. So, who is the huge mistake heading into the 2020 season? And that name may surprise you right now. Going with the 7th selection in the 5th round, the 5th tight end off the board is Darren Waller.
That's kind of fitting, in my opinion.
Yeah?
I mean, a lot of people, some people might find that, controversial or whatever, but I think he might have been a little bit of a benefactor of just being a target hog last year. And with all the new weapons they've got, maybe a quarterback change at some point, I just don't know how to trust his outlook this year, and definitely not paying the 507, which is his current ADP.
Interesting.
And I mean, like I alluded to before Steve got started in this one, the drop off is here. I was, you guys were jumping off the train one before this. I am now all in with you. Like it is, if you do not, it's got to be the right tight end 4. It's safer to go with the top 3. But if you're still going to roll the dice at the top 4, you do not want to do that again at the top 5. So, Steve, how's it looking? Does it recover at all with the ADP tight end 6?
A slight bounce back, and I do want to say that I probably could have played in the slot for the Raiders last season. That's how desperate their receiving core and their target options were. So, yeah, I
Hunter
agree with you there,
Renfro
Benny.
is highly offended.
All right. Well, I guess I could have started on the outside then. but yeah, I agree with you there, Benny. I think Darren Waller is definitely going to be set for a major target regression, so one to look out for there. Now, the ADP tight end 6, last year that was Hunter Henry, going at the 603. He did put together a tight end 9 finish. There were the injury concerns there.
Largely late in the season, man. He balled out late. Had to wait to get going, but yeah.
Yeah.
He always comes back. He always gets hurt, but he always comes back. It's Sorry.
Yeah, no, certainly. And the prior season to that, we had a tight end 8 finish out of this position, a tight end 86. I think that was Tyler Eifert. I think he maybe caught one pass and then his back broke again or something, and he missed the rest of the season. And then a tight end 16 finish, tight end 28 finish, and then a tight end 9 finish. So, looking at it from a 6-year average, you're looking at drafting this person in the 6th round, 609. Average overall finish of tight end 26. And I do remind everyone, there was a tight end 86 finish. That certainly does pull that down a bit.
It skews it, sure. But, if you're still looking for a tight end at this point in your draft, I think the numbers would tell you and advise you to just give it some time. Wait a little bit longer, because right now, as you look at the numbers, tight end 6 is giving you 0 upside. 0 occurrences of that player actually finishing in the top 6 at the position. So you're drafting the 6th guy, you would at least want him to hit that or better. No, not once in the last 6 years has that happened. Only 50% of the time are you getting a top 12 tight end. Only 50%. You have a 50-50 shot of getting a tight end 1 or busting. A tight end 2 or worse. Listen, we've been saying it over and over again. You're still drafting starters at this point. This is not the starter I want. And right now, this one's crazy. Going with the 2nd pick in the 6th round. The 6th tight end off the board is Gronk. You want to talk
just a better place?
You know what? You're absolutely right. What better spot for him to be on this study than this? 50-50 shot of being a tight end 1 or busting. And that is exactly what Gronk is in my mind. You want to take a dart throw late? Fine. 5th round? Whew, boy.
Yeah, Gronk. I mean, he's going at the top of the six.
Six, you're right. You're right. Yes,
but it's still. But here's the thing: as far as Gronk goes specifically, I don't think any of us are going to be surprised if he has a disappointing fantasy season.
Right.
I don't think any of us would be surprised if he was tight end 1 overall. And he could be anything in between. I mean, maybe I'm alone in that, but there is a range of outcomes where he is still Brady's top red zone target in what may be an extremely potent offense. And, it's not out of the realm that Gronk.
No, you're right. You're right. I could see him definitely being that red zone threat that he's always been. I just don't know if the legs are there for him on a yardage level to keep up with guys like Kelsey and the guys at the top. But we'll see.
By name only, I think his ADP's going up the closer we
you're right. You're right. You're right.
Got to.
And listen, we all had high expectations of different offenses in the past. Sure. Cleveland Browns of 2019.
Hey, you calm it down over there.
It doesn't mean that it's all going to just click, especially with no off season.
How are GM's better than your GM?
All right, moving on.
When we get back to this ADP study,
how do I mute these things? I gotta mute. I gotta figure out how to mute your mic.
You shut it. When we get back to looking at the ADP tight end 6, we're talking about the 609 in a 50-50 shot at tight end 1 production with zero upside. Like we've said, right. I will pass.
Yep.
Now, going back to looking at 2017. In 2019, there was 6 out of 12 tight end 1s not drafted. 2018, it dropped down to 5 out of 12. And in 2017, it drops yet again to 4 out of 12. The tight end 4, tight end 8, the tight end 9, and the tight end 10 went undrafted. So when you are looking at like the range of the tight end 5, the tight end 6, and you're seeing that the numbers are just not on your side, rest assured that either very later in the draft or completely for free, there are guys that will return tight end 1 production for you every single season.
Ben, so real quick, before we move on to the next guy, not only are you pointing out guys for free that can finish in the top 12, but think about the opposite perspective. Think about all the guys they're replacing who were drafted in the top 12, who did not finish there.
Yes. You're taking wide receivers, running backs, you're stacking your starting lineup, you're stacking your bench in some cases before you. I take bench running backs and wide receivers before I draft my tight end 1.
Yep.
I mean, there are certain times where you're in the right spot where you go high end at the tight end position, but there's plenty of times where you wait or you don't even draft a tight end at all.
Yep.
And you just look to stream and see what sticks. So it can only go up from here, fellas. So Steve, ADP tight end 7, how'd it look?
Yeah, ADP tight end 7 actually is a little bit of a bounce back. And before I jump into that, I love what you guys were just discussing as far as, wanting to wait. And Ben, I love that you're giving everybody the year by year, like how many of these guys are undrafted, because a big part of not wanting to take these guys in the middle and put 5th, 6th round draft capital into them, because I've done it to myself too many times. You just
gotta learn.
The upside guy, I'll just wait. Okay, he's going. Okay, man. Well, you can't cut ties with a 5th round pick after week 1 or 2 to pick up that breakout tight end. But if you wait and you call your shot late and the guy you miss on him, it's like, okay, well, I'll get rid of him and I'll go pick up a guy who busted out week 1 or 2, and you certainly get an advantage over your league mates doing that.
Hey, speaking calling a shot, I'd like to call an audible. Because I'm looking at our data on the screen for this podcast, and I'm seeing a lot of similar numbers for the next 3 spots of tight ends. So why don't we go through and have Steve cover the next 3 spots, 7, 8, and 9, tell us their historical finishes. I'll go in and tell you where they finished then on each one, and then Ben, you can give us your data. There's a lot of similarities between these next 3 spots.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, so we'll go. I'll just go ahead and kind of give an overall summation after I tell you who the ADP tight end 7, 8, and 9 was, just at least for 2019.
Sure.
Right. So last season that was Jared Cook, was going at the 6'11", finished as tight end 7, a very up and down season.
All right.
Red zone monster, missed a few games with injury. Now the tight end 8. totally different story.
Oh, boy.
Vance McDonald, offseason darling, hype train, finished tight end 31, was going at the 703, and then the Chief, David Njoku.
Man.
This one pains me as a Browns fan. Your ADP tight end 9 in 2019. Finished tight end 77, injured, then in Freddie Kitchens' doghouse for whatever that's worth. And then, so there's your tight end 789 for 2019. Now, 2019 as a whole, an overall tight end 19 finish with a 50% chance return on investment. In your ADP tight end 8 in this study, tight end 16 average finish with a 50% return on investment, and this is why Jay was saying, this is why Jay called an audible. Then the tight end 9, the tight end 21 average overall finish with again a 50% return on investment. So you have all three of these seasons 50-50 coin flip on getting, a positive ROI. And, you really only have a round between them, the 703, the 710, the 804. When
it's
you're
like that
talking
point in the draft where there's a run on tight end.
Exactly. This is it. This is perfect, guys, because you're right. 703, 710, 804. Tight ends are starting to go off the board. You feel pressured to do the same, so you're going to go grab the best name that you can. But you saw last year, Steve said it. 2 of these 3 tight ends, the tight end 8 and the tight end 9, finished tight end 31 and tight end 77, and a lot of those names were hyped, and some I was buying into, I'll admit it. So, of these 3 spots, tight end 7, tight end 8, tight end 9 in drafts, you have a 17% chance of getting a top 6 tight end. So, a teeny bit of upside. You have a 33% chance of getting a top 12 tight end, somewhere between the 6 and 12 range. Okay, that's some decent return. That's right where you're drafting them. But then you have a 50% chance out of these 3 spots of getting a getting a tight end who finishes outside the top 12. A bust. A 50-50 shot with a tiny bit of upside out of these 3 spots. I don't know what to make of that right now, Ben, but I can tell you
I do. 3 straight spots where you have identical ROI numbers and identical usability numbers where it's 50-50 tight end 1 production or not usable with just a little tiny bit of upside.
Yeah, you're right.
But here's the thing. When you tell me that, then it lends to just pay for the cheap, go for the cheapest.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
And that's the concept. We are now in that tier where whether you spend at the end of the 6th to the end of the 8th round, you're getting the same type of production.
Right.
And, the names, Jay, Evan Ingram, Hunter Henry, Austin Hooper, going to 612, 703, and 812. If you have to make me pick one of those 3 guys, I'm going to go with the cheapest one because they all have different reasons for pros and cons and things of that nature.
Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, if you want to wrap up, I was going to transition into the tight end 10 because if you're thinking, I need to grab a tight end, I can't wait, these names are coming off the board, pump the brakes. Wait to see what we get to in the next 3 tight end spots.
Yeah, and not only that, when you look at 2019, 50% of the tight end ones went undrafted. 2018, it was only 5 out of 12. 2017, it dropped down to 4 out of 12. 2016, it was back at 6 out of 12. In 2016, your tight end 3, your tight end 5, your tight end 6, your tight end 9, your tight end 10, and your tight end 12 all went for free.
Almost identical to last year. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it really is. So you're starting to see that trend develop where over the last 4 years, I mean, about half the time you get tight end 1 production for free. So if you are not in love with a tight end outside of the top 3 or 4, it's just worth it to wait. Period.
Yeah.
So yeah, but like Jay said, we've got some good news even before it gets free, and it starts with ADP Tight End 10. Steve?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
Start with
yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm looking one ahead.
Let's get this garbage out of the way real quick. We'll get to the good stuff in a second.
You know what? Spoiler alert. ADP Tight End 10 is trash.
Yeah, I mean, and it has been by and large over the 6-year course of this study. Last season, you happen to have a nice season out of Austin Hooper, who was on average the tight end 10 in drafts at the 8-11. Obviously, if you picked him up last season there, Ben, you're probably pretty happy about that and the production that you got. But other than a tight end 5 finish coming out of this spot, it's been not only bust, but a couple that are, they're players that shouldn't even register in fantasy football rankings. It's been that bad. So even though we're talking an average draft price at the 8-10, you still want something better than an overall average tight end 22 finish, and still a 1 in 3 chance that you're even going to get a return on your investment. So like Ben said, it's not great. Understatement.
Nope, not great. 33% chance of getting that top 6 tight end, a nice return, a steal, really, if you want to call it that, and sneaking in some elite value there. But the problem is you're staring at 67% of a chance of a bust. A tight end 2 or worse, 13 overall or worse at the position. So, you're really going all in. You're rolling the dice big time, because the odds say if you're going to roll the dice at a tight end spot, at that tight end 10 spot in the 8th round, you have a better chance of busting than returning a solid investment at that pick. And right now, that player is actually going a little bit behind that. 3rd pick in the 9th round. So now we are getting into, if you want to take a tight end early, we're getting into that territory. But that player right now is Noah Fant.
I find this very interesting, because I think the usability percentages nail this guy. I think it's 33% chance that he has like a top 6 type of season.
Yeah.
2/3 chance that he's not going to be usable.
Dude, I totally agree. I know, yeah.
Anything in between, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it was a fun ride of mediocrity from ADP tight end 7 to ADP tight end 9, but ADP tight end 10 just completely fell off the rails again. It's the second worst ADP tight end.
Hold on, it's time to get this train going again. Let's go. Hop aboard.
Real quick. In 2015, you had 5 once again. Tight end ones go undrafted.
That's unbelievable.
Listen,
that is unbelievable.
The tight end 2 went undrafted. The tight end 4 went undrafted. Tight end 8, tight end 11, and tight end 12.
You know who the tight end 2
was? 42% of the time.
Do you know who the
tight end 1 production for free?
Do you know who the tight end 2 was that year?
I'll look it up.
Okay, I didn't know if you had it written down.
I'll look it up. No.
Okay, that's interesting, man. Tight end 2. We've got a couple tight end 3s. That's unreal, man. That is unreal.
It's going to be like a Steve, Greg Olson or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. But I know it gets better with the last 2 spots in this
let's
episode,
go.
And it starts with ADP tight end 11. Steve, take it away.
Yeah, it certainly does, especially when you look at it from a positive ROI perspective. Now, not so much last season. The tight end 11 was Delaney Walker. His draft price didn't kill you, but, obviously he didn't do anything fantasy worthy last year. Finished as tight end 41. However, from 2018 to 14, we had 4 instances where we did get a positive return on investment out of the tight end 11, with the tight end 11 finish, tight end 12, tight end 13, and tight end 13. There was also another a Tyler Eifert in the middle of there going tight end 24. Man, Tyler Eifert has just really bitten a lot of people who even roll the dice on
He
him.
And Jordan Reed, man.
Yeah, those guys. They'll live in fantasy football infamy. But so, it's interesting to me that, this late at the tight end 11, and like you guys had alluded to it earlier, it's almost like, you know what, I'll let my league mates go ahead and burn draft capital and pick tight ends because it's such a crapshoot. And I'll just, dictate to me who I'll end up taking. And, that's, I think, better than reaching and calling your shot, and you're probably going to miss anyways. But, I mean, overall, a tight end 19 finish isn't tragic considering tight end 11 is, what we're talking about as far as the ADP. And again, you have a 2/3 of a chance of actually like hitting on this pick and it being, like a respectable player. Granted, when you're finishing tight end 11, 12, or 13, you're certainly not a fantasy impact type tight end, but you're certainly usable, right, Jay?
Yep, hold on. Ben's got a smile on his face. I think he might have uncovered who that tight end 2 was.
The tight end 2 in 2015, the production of this gentleman was then chased very unsuccessfully for the next several years because free agent Jordan Reed.
I knew it. As soon as I said his name, I'm like, it's going to be Jordan Reed.
So that was the season.
Yeah, exactly. And then everybody who took him after that paid for it dearly.
Fantastic. Yeah, Steve, like you said, at this point in drafts, you've gotten a couple of bench players on your roster. Now you're starting to think, okay, now I'm going to go tight end, fill out my starting spots, my field players, and you've allowed everybody else to take the risk ahead of you. Again, we're talking about the lowest scoring spot of field players on your roster, and you're really going to still try to get a guy who can come close to those upper echelon guys with really not paying that much of a draft price. So on average, late in the 9th round, almost the 10th round, and 67% of the time, you're getting a top 12 tight end. Only 33% of the time are you busting a little bit. So the odds are in your favor that you're going to get that top 12, that starting tight end for your roster, which is great. Right now, with the 11th pick in the 9th round, again, almost the 10th round in drafts, is Jared Cook.
Yeah, and you know what? I feel like that's going to be Jared Cook's type of season. Nothing spectacular in the top 6.
Just solid.
He's going to be a solid, usable tight end 1 more weeks than not. That is my assessment of Jared Cook right now. Yeah, I know Steve loved Jared Cook, rode him to another championship. But, when you look back at the run on tight ends, ADP Tight End 7 through ADP Tight End 9, those price tags are 2-3 rounds more expensive than when you're at the ADP Tight End 11, and you're getting a better usability percentages. So, again, you just have to be patient. You have to wait. If the right guys aren't there, don't panic just because everybody else is going with tight ends, because we have told you the insane number of tight end 1 production that you get for free every season. And 2014 is going to be no different right after Steve discusses ADP Tight End 12.
Yeah. I absolutely love it. And like you said, I mean, even at this point in time in your draft, there's probably some nice upside, valuable bench players you could be collecting for your roster at more fantasy critical positions than tight end. So, certainly worth the wait. And looking at the ADP Tight End 12 here, outside of the last 2 seasons, which last year was Eric Ebron, and I think some of us saw that one coming, but he was going to the ADP 10-10 and finished tight end 25. And the year before that, Jack Doyle went tight end 33. But outside of that, the previous 4 seasons out of this spot, we've seen tight end 11, tight end 7, tight end 10, and tight end 5 finishes. So, an overall average of tight end 15, and we're talking an average price of the 10-12, so last pick of the 10th round, certainly a pick that you can part with. And overall having a 2/3 shot at having a positive return on investment. And collectively out of the tight end 11 and 12 spots, we're talking, a 6-year average. So 12 pieces of the study, 8 of them, 2/3, you've gotten a positive return on your investment out of these last 2 spots.
Yep, and Ben made a point on the last player, on the tight end 11, where you're getting better odds than those tight ends that we discussed at 7, 8, and 9. Not only is it better, guys, it's twice as good. You have double the odds of getting a top 12 player out of the 11 and 12 spot in drafts than you are the 7, 8, and 9 spot in drafts. And they are going 3, 4, 5 rounds earlier when you could be capitalizing on upside or bench players, like you said, Steve, or getting some type of commodity that's valuable, easy for me to say, for your fantasy team. So right now, the tight end 12, the last starter taken in drafts, has a 67% chance of finishing as a tight end 1, a top 12 tight end, even has some upside. We have an occurrence of a top 6 tight end in the last 6 years, and only a third of a chance of busting. So right now, the final starting tight end in drafts is going with the 9th pick in the 10th round, and that is Tyler Higbee.
Man,
Interesting.
Can we just put it out there right now? Can everybody just keep his ADP right there, please? That would be fantastic. I would love to pay the 10.09 for Tyler Higbee heading into the season this year. And that's right on pace with the 6-year average price tag for the ADP tight end 12 at the 10-12 spot. So 10.09, 10-12, that's about the range historically that you're getting that tight end 12 in your draft. And you're so quite simply put, from a usability perspective, this ADP tight end 12 spot gives you the best odds of upside and tight end 1 production since the ADP tight end 4. You see the drop off?
Oh, man. Woo!
The drop off is real. And, when you look back one more time, back to 2014, it was yet again 50% of the time you got tight end 1 production for absolutely free, undrafted. The tight end 4, the tight end 6, the tight end 8, the tight end 10, the tight end 11, and the tight end 12. 6 out of 12, 50%. That's 32 out of 72, or 44.4% of all top 12 tight ends have gone undrafted over the last 6 seasons.
That is crazy.
So you see ADP tight end 1 through 4, okay. Everything from ADP tight end 5 to tight end 11,
wait.
You're going to want to wait. You're just going to want to wait. So, and Steve, I know you have got some historical overall numbers for, you took a look at the top 5 over the last 6 years, and then just the overall, how often they met or exceeded their ADP.
Yeah, and if you go to fantasyforesight.com and go to the Foresight Encyclopedia tab, I do have, my latest piece written up there that does, look at all 72 of these tight ends over the last 6 years, kind of just from a meet or exceed their draft position perspective. And I also did break everything down round by round. So that's probably interesting for some of y'all to check out. So please do if you feel inclined. But I looked at, from a top 5 perspective, of just simply meeting or exceeding your draft position, because I kind of think of the top 5 as more of your differentiating on a fantasy squad type players. That's only occurred with tight ends 11 out of 30 times. So overall, that's a shade under 37%. Not terrible, but obviously the odds aren't good. And as we talked about earlier, when you're really looking at those top couple spots, the odds do go a little higher in your favor. Now, I also looked at it just from a overall, all-encompassing view as far as meeting or exceeding. And that's only happened out of these 72 tight ends, only a total of 25 times, period, which breaks down to roughly about 35%. So not really good, fellas. So, I think it just speaks to everything that we've been discussing, the three of us, throughout this episode tonight about, the position as a whole, the kind of values you can get when you just wait and pick up a guy off the waiver wire who went undrafted. And I love the information that you guys gave tonight, Jay, with all the usability stuff on these guys. Very fascinating as far as the top 6 finishes that you don't even see coming out of some of these spots, and then you see later on in other spots. And then Benny, with the amount of guys that have been going undrafted each season, that just, I knew it would be relatively high, but I didn't think it'd be roughly half of them. It's insane. Right?
And I've got one more surprise stat for you guys.
Oh boy,
here tonight. All right. So everybody, I just want to, we've talked about this. If you've listened over the past 3 seasons, a couple of times we've touched on the fact that, for most of these episodes, by and large, I am the one that does the preparation and sends out a spreadsheet to the guys every episode. I have embedded a secret stat
Oh!
Spreadsheet that I sent you both.
Oh, no!
If either one of you or both of you go to the box of the overall meeting or exceeding ADP down at the bottom, there's a big darked out box right to the right of that. If you make that any sort of light background, tell me what that says.
Top 3 within 3 of their ADP, 11 out of 18, or 61.1%.
So when you talk about whether or not to go early or to wait, I'm going to tell you, I think you should go early, because the top 3 tight ends within 3 finishes of their ADP over the last 6 years give you a 61.1 return on that extremely high-end investment.
Wow.
So, if I'm on the fence about a running back or a wide receiver and I'm in the top of the 3rd round, all bets are off for me. I might be going tight end.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, of all the positions we've covered, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, that is the highest of the early rounds, but they also have the lowest of the latter rounds. So you're right. It's either you go in early and you get your guy and hopefully at a good price, or you wait.
Absolutely. Love it. This is the most fun I've had with this series so far in the 2 years that we've done it. I think we've improved the format this year. I think Steve's studies more in depth. I mean, I've had a lot of fun with these. I remember them being fun last year, but not this much fun, guys. I don't know about you.
Yeah. Hey, and if you're listening or watching, if you enjoyed the episode, if you learned anything at all, give us a follow on YouTube, subscribe to our channel. You can catch us on Sportscaster. You can catch us on Facebook Live. Also, hopefully Periscope/Twitter, as long as it's streaming properly. And or follow us, subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. We really enjoy it. We're going to come at you with some preview podcasts next.
Oh, man, we have an exciting next 5 weeks coming for everybody. And believe it or not, if this crazy virus doesn't mess things up, we might be in preview season after that.
Woo!
So we're all going to keep our fingers crossed and hope that's the case. But next up, over the next 5 weeks, 2 weeks from now, we're going to start a new series, What We Learned in 2019. It's going to be a little bit more of a concise, abbreviated format that I think everybody's going to like. And next week, we have a brand new custom metric at Fantasy Foresight. Foresight consistency is unlike any consistency metric that's out there, and we cannot wait to go over it. It's going to be a great time.
Love it.
We'll see everybody next Thursday. Have a great Memorial Day weekend. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time. Can't wait.
And that wraps up this episode of Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We thank you for joining us. Be sure to visit us, as always, at fantasyforesight.com. Use the links at the bottom of the page to find us across social media, including Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you pod. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you next time.